Welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck podcast with United Airlines pilot and investment advisor, Alan Bewley, who will take you behind the scenes with airline pilot entrepreneurs, academics, and other professionals. And now, your host, Alan Bewley.
Without question, 9/11 was the most devastating day in American history since the attack on Pearl Harbor. Like after Pearl Harbor, Americans reacted to 9/11 with sheer will and determination. Two inspiring stories come from within the United Airlines family. Melodie Homer, wife of Leroy Homer, first officer on United Flight 93, and Ellen Saracini, wife of Victor Saracini, captain on United Flight 175, have spent nearly 2 decades creating legacies for their late husbands. Melodie founded the Leroy Homer Foundation, providing scholarships for young, aspiring aviators. Ellen has lobbied Congress for secondary cockpit barriers, and just this year, pressed Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg personally. Additionally, Ellen has worked with her community to build the Garden of Reflection Memorial near Yardley, Pennsylvania. Welcome Beyond the Flight Deck.
Joining me today, Ellen Saracini and Melodie Homer. Ladies, welcome Beyond the Flight Deck.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you both. I want to start just a minute. If you can, I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself. I've given a little bit of an intro, but just one moment about yourself and tell us what you are working on and why I have you here today. We'll go ahead with you, Melodie.
My name is Melodie Homer. My husband was Leroy Homer, first officer on Flight 93. And I'm here to talk about the Leroy Homer Foundation and what we've been doing for the last 18 years almost, and what we are looking to do in the future in terms of our scholarship program and our aviation foundation overall.
Great, thank you. Ellen?
I'm Ellen Saracini. My husband, Victor, was the captain of United Flight 175 on September 11th. And I've been working for the almost 20 years on a 9/11 memorial called the Garden of Reflection. It's located in Pennsylvania. And we're winding up some efforts on that right now. But for the last 10 years, I've also been working on legislative work to protect the cockpit with secondary barriers.
Wonderful. As a United pilot, we've seen a lot of emails from ALPA mostly on both of the work that you guys are doing. But today we'll get a little more in depth, a little background of on the work you're doing and why. I do want to start out because I wouldn't be doing my job as a financial planner if I didn't touch on one topic. And that is, both of you, unfortunately, went through the event of losing a spouse. There are things that you can do to prepare a family for that, whether it's estate planning documents, simple things like beneficiary designations, or how you name or title accounts, putting accounts in joint accounts. So let me ask you, and Ellen, we'll start with you. I know it's 20 years ago, and I know it was a horrible time, but if you were to look back, are there things that you and Victor did well that made it easier for you to go through all of the estate planning process once he passed? Were there things maybe that didn't go so well that you look back, you probably should have done differently? And this, again, is just an education piece for the viewers.
You know, trying to remember back 20 years ago, I don't think anybody is prepared on the day after. Trying to think of, what do I have to do? What do I have to find? In our household, as in a lot of households, one person takes care of paperwork and the other person takes care of kids or working or whatever it is that needs to be done. Everyone's life is different, but they're all the same. We spend a lot of time together when we can, but on things that are tasks, sometimes you delineate those tasks to one or the other. And so Victor always did the paperwork. So I wasn't so up on the paperwork. And 20 years ago was a long time ago because we just were starting with computers, and the computer systems were a whole lot different. So access was more in files, that you had to open up a filing cabinet and look and see what was up with that. But and Victor had his own unique filing system, I discovered. I'm sure he understood it very well. He was very good at taking care of our finances. But I think then I found everything. But I think that it was our philosophy that made it that we were okay. We never lived beyond our means. I remember him saying a long time ago, when we first were together and really just as we were having children, we both came from families who were not able to give the children much when they left the house. Not complaining about that. It was just a fact of life. And I know each generation wants to do more and more for their children. And he said, do you want to start right now and be the generation that is able to pass along an inheritance to our children? And I said, yes. And that being said, we bought a very small house. We paid it off, and then we used that to buy our house. And like I said, we never lived beyond our means. So all of our purchases were ones that we could afford, not ones that we were going to finance, unless it was a house. That was a little bit of a financial, but we were able to definitely support ourselves with that. So, for us, it was, we did do the planning. We just didn't do the planning for September 11th and how that would turn things upside down, because our finances did change after that. My finances then they did change after the death of Victor.
Were there any problems for you accessing life insurance proceeds, retirement accounts, getting into any savings or checking accounts? Was all that paperwork done ahead of time to where it went as smoothly as possible, I should say?
Melanie and I probably are going to be in a different category from anyone else, because this was September 11th, and September 11th meant that people were bending over backwards to try to help you and accommodate you. On the first day of was September 11th, I had people from the bank who Victor went in all the time, and they loved Victor. They came to my house just to tell me, no problem with anything. You'll have full access. We'll make sure that we have everything for you. You won't have to worry about chasing things down. And so it was really that way with everything. Now, I don't believe that that would be as easy for a lot of people if it wasn't a September 11th timeframe.
Melodie, do you kind of echo that same sentiment there, as far as people were really reaching out to help quickly?
I was pretty new to New Jersey, so I didn't know, for example, my bankers or people that well, but I will say that we had just organized everything very well. And I think part of that was because Leroy lost his dad when he was 12 years old, and he saw the turmoil that can happen if you don't have a will in place, if things are not, organized. So that was something that right away, even though we were both very young, he wanted to put in place. And I did write the checks. So I knew kind of where everything was, but he was very careful to make sure that we always had a will. When we had our daughter, she was probably a month old, and she was there when we went to have our will redone. So we always really kept up on that. We made sure that probably a day or two after we got married, we updated all of the beneficiary information with United. So I think all of that is really important, because of course you never think anything like this is going to happen, but it is really important to just keep all of that up to date. And certainly for myself, I did the exact same thing. Very shortly after September 11th, I went in and made sure my will was up to date for my kids, and I have continued to do that. So I think that is just really important. I think people sometimes get a little nervous, or they think that that means something's going to happen to them. Like they have this sort of feeling like, I don't want to talk about this right now. But I really felt comfortable that we always had everything settled, and I've continued to kind of live that way.
Looking back, would you say that the amount of life insurance that you had for Victor and Leroy, did it work out to be what you needed?
That's a hard question to answer because a lot happened at the same time. So, of course, the bankruptcy happened. Mm-hmm. So then we lost, on the one hand, we had life insurance, but then we lost retirement, and then we continued to lose retirement, and then we lost ESOP. So at the time, I think both Ellen and I, we had the max of what we could get. It was just the circumstance that nobody would have kind of known at the time that would affect us kind of later on. Would you say that that's kind of how?
Yes. And for us, we also had a victims compensation fund. Not that paid us off in great amounts, partly because while the fund was ending as far as you being able to file, but United only had mentioned the bankruptcy, but it wasn't official. So we actually lost the pension because they deducted it from the fund, and then we lost it after when United went bankrupt. So we lost out on we lost it twice. Yes. So that was very monumental for us to not have those resources. But Melodie's very resourceful. I am very good too with not overspending what we you think you get a little influx of money and you think, oh, okay, now I have some money. But we both were very much very conscious to know that our kids were very young and still had to go to college, and all the expenses that we were going to incur all along the years. So luckily, both of us too also found really great financial planners for us, so that they were able to help us in areas that we really didn't have a lot of knowledge about.
Good. That's very good. Let's switch gears and really talk about why we're here. I really appreciate you both sharing that. Let me back up. There is someone that you both know that is a 9/11 widow. Things didn't go so well for, that maybe the planning wasn't as well as Leroy and Victor. Again, without mentioning anyone's name, is there something particular that wasn't done that should have been done to help that widow work things out, get the estate planning done? Do you know enough about that to speak a little on that?
I think that certainly my understanding was the will was out of date, so that was quite a big deal. But in addition, the beneficiary on the United life insurance and those types of benefits was also not updated. So that ended up, because the Victims Compensation Fund followed along with what Wills said, or in terms of who was the rightful next of kin, that followed along with it. So it became quite a contentious situation. It went to court, and it, while we were all going through all of this, to have to add an additional family disagreement court along with all of this and still try to make ends meet, it was really difficult. So I think what I would encourage people to do is just make sure that you get married, a few days after you get married, or there's a change in life circumstances, just really make sure that paperwork is updated with the company.
Okay.
I just said just the other day, I was with one of my daughters and said, I really have to update the will because it's outdated. So I need to do that. And it's something that it's kind of there, and then you don't think about it. But it's important because your wishes are more clear in a current situation, not 20 years later and 10 years later, or previously when you had the intent. They change. My kids are older, and their parameters on wills should be very different. And
Sure.
I know they're both going to have children, so a lot of things change. It's just, we don't want to have to admit we're either getting old or one day we won't be around. So you always feel like you have time to do your estate planning, your financial planning, your wills on your intent. But it's really something that should be looked into more. And I'm guilty of that right now. I need to update it.
Okay, you need a reminder. I'll put one on my calendar.
Exactly.
Get back to you.
Helen, did you do that?
Yeah. So, so what we do for our clients when we get a new client on, or for our annual review process, and you ladies can help weigh in on this. We make sure on their retirement accounts, correct beneficiaries, contingent beneficiaries, whether they're United retirement accounts or outside of United, life insurance policies, correct primary contingent beneficiaries, any bank accounts, savings, checking, or even your home. As long as you're titled joint tenants with rights of survivorship, the ownership flows through to the surviving spouse. That's pretty simple for a married couple. So what you're left is, other stuff, selling cars, and that's if the cars are titled in joint ownership, that kind of settles that as well.
But they usually aren't.
I know. And as far as estate planning documents, a will, durable power of attorney, and advanced medical directives. Those are the three things that we recommend people do at the very least. My kids are minors, so we have trust in case my wife and I both pass.
I have a trust as well. And that's changed as my kids have aged, because I've actually changed who their guardians would be. So initially, when my daughter was little, it would have been my parents, but then my parents got too old. So then I had to switch the guardianship. So that's the thing about, for me, for wills and, trusts, living trusts, all of that, it's been a continuing process of changing it based on their ages and then what's going to happen at a specific age. So, and something that I didn't know when I moved to a new state, I didn't know that my will was not valid in the new state. And I don't know if that's something that most people know, but the only reason that I found that out was I was going to change the guardianship from my parents because they were getting older. And that's when I found out that a will, stops at a state line and that you do have to get a new will. So
that's a great point, Melodie, that when you look at your trust or you look at the wills, you look at who may be the guardians of your kids. Yeah, you can't just think about your kids. You got to think who's watching over them. If those people pass away, if you don't have backups already in your wills, or backup trustees in your trust, you've got to make sure you have all that, because if during or between updates, a parent gets too old, you've got someone listed to pass the baton on, right? So that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Melodie, really. Okay. So both of you are working on foundations you've been working on for quite some time. We mentioned them a few minutes ago. Melodie, let's dive into the Leroy Homer Foundation. Let's start at the beginning. When did this come to you? When was it a walking out of the shower? This is what I need to do. Was there that kind of an epiphany moment, or how did this come about? And tell us, what your, my envision when I started my investment practice 16 years ago was one thing. It's different today. So kind of go into where you wanted it, what you thought about it was going to do and compared to where it is today. And we'll just go along and kind of learn how it's grown.
Okay, so I really, after September 11th, as you can imagine, I was just trying to survive and get through the day and raise my daughter. I really didn't give much thought to how I would want to memorialize Leroy beyond, what we had done as a family. But we had a tight group of friends that Leroy had been in the military with, who also then as a group kind of all got hired at United around the same time. And they wanted to help me start something. And the idea was Leroy was a single, his dad had died young, so he was raised by his mom, and he had a lot of siblings. So flight school for him was not something that was easily obtainable. So he worked after school, cleaning doctor's offices to be able to pay for flight school. And we thought, what if we could do something to help, potential aviators with their first step of flying, which is the private pilot certification? What if we could do that? Because, at that point, and even more so today, kids don't have time after school. They have to be involved in sports. They have to make sure that their GPA is high. They have to do community service. They have so many more obligations to kind of set themselves apart. And so we thought, if we could provide this like initial step for young adults who want to become pilots, that would be a way that we could preserve Leroy's legacy and his love of flight. So that's kind of how we started off. And our mission statement really hasn't changed from the beginning. We didn't know, we looked at the cost of flight training. So we thought, okay, we'll start out with 3 scholarships. And we also made the decision at the time that we want to fund scholarships to completion, because our thought process was, if we give someone $5,000, which was the average when we started 20 years ago, but they need $6,000 and they don't have that extra $1,000. Well, we wouldn't have really helped them complete the training, and then they may never complete the training. So we would be putting money towards something that really didn't, there wasn't an accomplishment or a goal associated with it. So that's kind of how we're different from other aviation scholarships, because we do work with the flight schools specifically. The money does not go to the awardee. And with the flight school, it can vary. We just had somebody who trained in Hawaii, and Hawaii is expensive, and East Coast and West Coast are expensive. And so, but that's something that we committed to in the beginning, and we feel like it has served us well. So we've continued to do that. There have been years where probably after September 11th, there was a influx of funds, because we were really in the media and in the spotlight. And then there would be years where donations wouldn't come in so much. So we decided that we would say up to 3, and then we would every year we would at least select 1 recipient, but with the knowledge that we would finish them, like they would complete. So we've done that, and we've had 100% completion, and leading to private pilot certification. In addition, all of our awardees have completed 4-year university. And then we have people who have gone to the service academies, who are currently flying in the Navy, flying in the Air Force, cadets at the Air Force Academy. We have a pilot at Delta Republic. Someone was just recently started with United. So this group that started in 2003 was our first, 2003, I'm sorry, 2003 was our first group. And they're all at that point now where they're definitely getting hired.
Sure.
And then we have some of our recipients who are flight instructors. We have somebody working in cyber at United. So they're not all in the cockpit, but sure, the majority of them have stayed in the industry.
Yeah. All right. So in the beginning, you put together basically, is the board a group of his friends from the military, from United, and you all sat down and how was the first big step in marketing for donations, marketing what you were going to do? Kind of take us back to that. Like, okay, here's what we want to do. Now, how are we going to do it? It's kind of like starting a business, right?
Right.
How did that start out for you? How challenging was that?
None of us were in fundraising. I'm a nurse. We had pilots, we had people, we had business people, we had a treasurer who was an accountant. No one knew nonprofit. So we started out doing a lot of research, and we were able to speak with some public relations people who, helped us out. We got a lot of help in the beginning because people were really wanting to do whatever they could to help people who had lost somebody on 9/11. So we did get a lot of support that way, but it was really a lot of trial and error. And one of the things that over the years we have really worked on is maintaining our individual donors, and because corporate donations can be quite difficult and challenging. Right. And so, but we have a really, really strong core of donors that we have been able to maintain, but it's been trial and error. Like Ellen and I both started around the same time. So we share ideas a lot, but Ellen does great with golf outings. Our group doesn't do as well with golf outings. So we would try different things, and it took several years before we were able to figure out what our thing was. So we do events every couple of years where we invite our donors, and then we have our scholarship recipients from years past show up. And that has been something that has been really successful for people to be able to see someone who they saw their picture when they were 17 in a Cessna, and now they're standing in front of a 767 or a C-17. Yeah. To be able to see that they were part of that has been really inspiring and helpful in keeping our donor base going. So we definitely learned on the job, and continue to learn on the job.
So after bankruptcy, starting in bankruptcy, you've heard this term from pilots you've talked to. We went through the lost decade, right? Mm-hmm. We went through the bankruptcy, and pensions were gone, the pay cuts. We were on those pay rates for 10 years. Not a lot of us wanted to encourage young people to get in aviation for a decade. Yeah. How did that play into your ability to fundraise from the pilot group, or did it? Or even outside the pilot group?
I think it really didn't have an impact that I was aware of. I mean, when I spoke to people, when I flew and I gave out my business card, people were very hopeful and excited. I didn't really sense that. Of course, I knew it existed, and I knew what was happening within the industry, but I didn't feel it from our the young adults who were applying for our scholarships. I didn't get a sense of that at all. They had a lot of hope, and they were excited about getting into aviation. And I really must say that I didn't get that sense from anyone who was around us. I think the only thing that I was told was to be careful about using Leroy's name because it led back to a negative event. And maybe if people felt sad, they would want to donate. But what we've been able to do is to, yes, Leroy was the start of this, but look at what we've done. Look at these 27 people who, now one of them might be your pilot flying you somewhere, so we've been able to pivot and make it not like a sad type of a thing where, people it's not a downer at all. If you
Yeah.
come to one of our events, it's very, very upbeat. So
United Pilot Group, specifically the United MEC, have they played a role in helping you promote it financially? How's that? Has there been a good relationship there?
yes, since day one, they have helped us a lot in a lot of ways, just personally with the company. But yeah, they have been very supportive, and the Just a Buck program has been a wonderful source of passive income, which of course is very important for, organizations such as what Ellen and I do, because we don't fundraise all the time. We don't have that sort of a structure where we're constantly holding events. So that has been wonderful to have the participation of the pilots in that program. So, and in addition to that, we have received checks from the MEC, most notably just a couple of months ago, which was very much appreciated. So yeah.
That was a big one, I understand.
Yeah, $50,000.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So it was $5,000-$6,000 for a private pilot's license 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's not anymore. What is the average cost now? And I know, again, it's going to vary between Hawaii and the coast and Oklahoma, for example, but what are you guys seeing?
I would say it's between 15 to 17,000 now.
Okay.
To complete someone. So that's about 60 hours of training, as well as like their check rides and things like that. So
okay. So your income sources are the Just a Buck program. They're the fundraisers that you do. Any other meaningful source of revenue, or those are those pretty much the say again?
We do our donor base. We do a couple of solicitations. We do 2 newsletters a year, and we've been doing really well. So that's when we decided this year that we wanted to pivot to working on an endowment, so that the foundation can go into perpetuity beyond when I'm here to do this. And we were able to start off. Quite frankly, I was surprised. I didn't know what was going to happen with the pandemic, where our donations would be, but we actually did really well. I think, in general, I think the world donated a lot during the pandemic. So we have been able to start off our endowment very robustly. And our goal is to be able to eventually, without fundraising, be able to fund the up to 3 scholarship awards
every year.
So that's our goal.
How do potential scholarship applicants find you?
Our scholarship window is open right now. If you're between the ages of 16 to 23, just go to our website, and it's the first thing that comes up. And our scholarships are open until January 31st. We notify people in May because we want to give them the chance to use the summer so they can fly as much as possible and get it done. We give them a 6-month time frame, but sometimes depending on where they're located with weather, even that is, now we're talking about November, December. Mm-hmm. So we have someone we're trying to finish up right now who's in Ohio. So
yeah.
Tough. So so we try to keep them within that window because we want them to not stretch it out. We want them to be as efficient as they can in order to use the funds as best we can.
Last question on this. What do you look for in the applicants? I know you get a lot. What is the wow factor that is getting these applicants their shot here?
Well, we try to keep it as objective as possible. So we have a scoring criteria, which includes GPA. We look at extracurricular activities, whether you're president, treasurer, whether you're involved in sports and you're a team captain, all of those types of things, leadership, leadership qualities. We look at all of that. And then we also look at, we ask you a series of questions. Why do you want to become a pilot? How do you see yourself getting to that goal? And a lot of what we look, that's the less objective part, of course, but we want to be able to understand how you see yourself getting there. What is your plan? Do you want to go to Embry-Riddle? Do you want to try to go through the Air Force Academy like Leroy did? What is your plan, and how do you plan to get to, what is your objective and how do you plan to get there? And we look for people who are, and what I like to say is, because this has happened repeatedly, is that we do pick who the Air Force Academy picks, but we pick them first. But we're looking for that well-rounded person who's really taken advantage of opportunities of Civil Air Patrol, of, whatever the thing, they've found a mentor, they have really done the work to prove to us that this is something they're serious about. So it's hard. I mean, at the end, when we're getting to the top 10 and the top 5, it is a really difficult decision. And definitely we wish we could do more at that point. And maybe, someday we will be able to give more scholarships, but we're really happy with the group that we have selected. And what they've been doing, and we're really proud. You said earlier that, did I imagine this is what it would look like? No idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind all the time. Being a nurse, I know this much about aviation, but I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning through my recipient. So it's been great.
Last question on that. Does the family income of the applicant come into play? If you've got 2 kids that are amazing, you're like, I want to take both of them, I got 1 slot left. One household is a 6-figure income. The other one is a, low middle class income. Is that part of it? It's like, hey, we've got a kid who's got more need than the other. Does that tend to be part of it, or do you try and keep that out of it?
We actually do not use income because several reasons, but first of all, that would entail having someone prove their income.
Right.
And we feel that based on our application, if you have the money, you're not going to take the time to fill out our application.
Sure.
We've had, I think last year we had a young man, actually we had twins apply. Their dad is a United pilot. However, they have a lot of children. Because we selected him, his twin brother, his parents were able to put him through his flight training. Yeah. So we don't necessarily use that as a cutoff. Yeah. Okay.
That's cool. All right. Let's go to Ellen. Ellen, you're working on 2 things. Let's talk for a moment about the foundation there for the Gardner Reflection before we move on to secondary barriers. Same question really for you that for Melodie. How did this come about? Was it, it's in your community there? Was it some of you that got together? Was this something that was your idea? But how did it come to be?
The memorial is in Pennsylvania, in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and we lost 9 people in our township and 18 in our county, which per capita in the state of Pennsylvania was the highest concentration of victims from September 11th. So we decided that we first thought of the 9 from Lower Makefield, that we would represent them in a peaceful and tranquil, honoring way. And then we said, wait a minute, there's 18 from Bucks County. It grew to 18. And then as time went on, it just kept the thought process about not remembering and honoring all those that we lost on September 11th was doing an injustice. So we incorporated representing everyone who died that day, and so we have everyone's name etched in glass. It's a 2.5 acre plot that is a living memorial. It's very beautiful. It's very tranquil. You really come to any 9/11 memorial perhaps with trepidation, and a long time ago people especially did. But when you leave the Garden of Reflection, you find a peace as you travel through it and as you're leaving. We've been told that from everybody that visits the memorial. So while we were in a crash site, I think that we really had a benefit because we were able to not represent just that day. Our emphasis is on the people that are not with us today, that they were vibrant, they had smiles, they had families, they had lives. And we wanted to show that peacefulness about them, not just the day that took them from us.
Sure. I've been to Ground Zero twice, and despite it being in Lower Manhattan, I walked away with that same kind of almost a sense of closure, if you will, that I probably never had before the first time I walked away from there. So I can certainly understand. I've not been to the Garden of Reflection yet. So tell me, how did the group come together to do this? And then from a fundraising perspective, a permission perspective, was it public land, private land? How difficult was that to get going?
The township wanted to do something. One of the Board of Supervisors lost her son. And so the township definitely wanted to, they offered us land. Quite frankly, they thought we were going to put in a tree and a bench, but that didn't happen. It turned out to be much bigger scope. And so as we went around, our township is very big on having open space and maintaining open space. And we went to this one area. It's a 62.5 acre park that is owned by the township that was not developed. And it was so peaceful there. And we actually, as we were walking along and looking for where the stream was that ran through the property, we found an old, tattered, small flag that was in the reeds. And we saw that as an omen that this was meant to be, that we have the memorial there. So the township gifted us 2.5 acres within the 62.5 acre. And now it has gotten where the park has really developed and is continuing to be developed by the township. So for us, it's wonderful. We have a secluded place that has its own area of tranquil, quiet, peacefulness, but it's located in an active park. And that's what we wanted, because it's more of remembering the lives that we lost, but you're doing it in a place that people want to come to and want to participate in activities there. So it was very important for us to want it in a park. And we've had a relationship with the township, but the township also said to us, well, if you want this, then you have to fundraise for it.
Okay.
So we did. We were having every type of fundraiser in the beginning, nonstop fundraisers, big ones, small ones. And we were able to, for the 5th anniversary, dedicate the Garden of Reflection, which we were very proud of our accomplishments. We had raised at that time almost $2 million to build the memorial. And we were extremely proud, because if you look at any other memorial that is of size, significance, they weren't able to do that until the 10th year. And for the 5th year, we were able to dedicate the garden. So as time happened, we kept on fundraising, but then it was just as Melodie said before, what's going to happen when I'm not here, and when we are not here, the ones working on it. And so we thought about an endowment. And so we started, we have our 501c3 foundation that is able to handle tax deductible donations. And our goal was to raise $2 million so that generating 3% off of that would be able to support $60,000 a year, which is what we feel we need to maintain the Garden of Reflection in perpetuity. So, we're there. We are, our goal has always been to get there, and we are still actively fundraising, but we're just there for our goal to be able to now start taking generated money from the investment to be able to support the garden.
And Melodie, how far out do you think you are fundraising wise? Is it going to take a while to get to the point where Ellen's foundation is financially, or is it something you're still just working towards?
We just started, and Ellen and I have been working on this. Ellen's been helping me with getting the endowment rolling. So I would hope that Ellen's been working about 10 years on her endowment, and I would hope that maybe, in 10 years from now, I would be able to say that I'm almost at the end as well. So,
okay.
Yeah.
When someone goes to donate to the Leroy Homer Foundation or to the Garden of Reflection, when we go to the websites to donate, is the money going today to the endowments or to the foundations? With Leroy Homer, Melodie, where is it going today?
So mine's a little bit different. We have small donors who may not be able to do an endowment amount. So we want to continue that stream for our recipients and our awardees for 2022, as an example. Okay. And then we have an endowment page, and endowments start at $2,500. And so when someone comes to our page, they can decide to do a larger amount, or they could do an immediate donation that will go into this year's cycle for scholarships.
And Ellen, does yours work the same way today?
Today, it is 100% of every donation goes directly to the endowment.
Wonderful. So Ellen, let's now switch gears to your second project, secondary barriers. As United Pilots, we saw some veiled attempt at some barrier that was difficult to disconnect. It was some flimsy wires. It wasn't much. The best thing they've done so far, I think, is just Kevlar steel framed doors, but it still doesn't, there's still an open door that is, exposed to then the cockpit to the cabin. Kind of like the foundation. When did you decide? Do you remember the time or the moment or the week or the month or the year that you said, this is what I want to work on? How did that happen?
I remember exactly when it was. It was December of 2012 when United Airlines took delivery of the beginning of the delivery of their 787 Dreamliners. And the first ones that came on site had secondary barriers. And United at the time now said, to Boeing, what are you doing bringing on an airplane with a secondary barrier? Well, the history of that was that United and Continental both had ordered 787 Dreamliners, but United ordered them with a secondary barrier and Continental ordered them without. And we know that after the merger, it's a United name, but it was a Continental management team. And that Continental management team said, we don't want the secondary barriers. And they paid Boeing to remove the barriers that they paid for coming with the aircraft. And I was appalled because after September 11th, Congress mandates a fortified cockpit door. That door is great. We need that door. And they thought it a solution to not being able to have the vulnerability on the flight deck. But it proved itself wrong, because multiple times during flight, we all know the cockpit door opens up. And it's during those times that we still have the exact same vulnerability that we did on September 11th. And when you can look at what came out of the 9/11 Commission after September 11th, It was a failure of imagination that they said contributed to September 11th. But what the terrorists said, from them interviewing and getting information and laptops and of the terrorists, they said that the terrorists were trying to determine the best method in order to take over the aircraft. And they looked at bombs and explosives and found them cumbersome. They had evaluated that with the World Trade Center bombing. But what their analysis was that they were simply going to wait until the cockpit door opened, because they knew it was going to open up 10 to 15 minutes after takeoff. They didn't consider breaking it down. So right now we have a great fortified cockpit door, but we have the same vulnerability because the cockpit door opens. So, United, their intent was to, and that's what you're saying about the flimsy, I call it a big person baby gate. That's what that secondary barrier looks like. But they installed them so that they would have a secure area behind the secondary barrier, but in front of the cockpit door, so that nobody was able to penetrate and the flight deck was not vulnerable anymore. So it was the correct decision to put on a secondary barrier, but none of the other, and it wasn't until 2012 that I found out that no other airline was thinking about that or doing anything about the vulnerability.
Sure. The one thing about that secondary barrier, even if someone can get through it, it creates enough of a delay that allows us to get the cockpit door closed.
So that's what they found in a study. It took the FAA until 2008 to actually form a study, and it was a 3-year long study involving all the stakeholders. So you had the TSA, Federal Air Marshals, you had all the airlines, you had flight attendants and pilots, Airbus, Boeing, everybody was in the study, all the stakeholders. And they were supposed to determine if there was a vulnerability on the flight deck, and if there was, what would be able to mitigate that vulnerability. And one of the things that they were able to evaluate was the secondary barrier that United had put on the aircraft. And that's what was in the study. And it was that determined it has stayed consistent, that we needed just to be able to hold off an intruder, for a 200-pound intruder, for 5 seconds. And the reason why we have to hold that off is because in the study, when you evaluated just a human barrier, that fails miserably. Think about a 200-pound intruder trying a 120-pound flight attendant trying to hold off this intruder. That doesn't work. The flight attendant in cart, there is a high percentage of time that the intruder in the study was able to get past the flight attendant, who also, we have to understand that the flight attendant was a Federal Air Marshal and knew the attack was coming, was able to get past the cart and flight attendant and into the cockpit in under 2 seconds, a high percentage of time. So really, that's not a viable option either. When they evaluated United's secondary barrier, it was the only thing that they could use that would hold off the intruder. By the time that intruder was able to get that secondary barrier undone, knowing how to undo it from the outside position, the cockpit was alerted and simply closed the door. So the secondary barrier is the only thing that works 100% of the time to protect the cockpit.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. We went through taser training, spent gosh knows how much money on the tasers, on the training, but still that situation is that person's in the cockpit already, right? So this is where that barrier is so much better.
That taser failed miserably. It was a great attempt to try to do something, but it failed miserably. We have Federal Air Marshals. They're just simply not on enough of the flights. We have the FFDO program. A great program, but it's a voluntary program. And there again, it's not on every single aircraft, and international law says they're not allowed to carry their weapons. Right. So it's only on domestic flights.
Right.
So the only thing that we have available that will 100% of the time protect the flight deck is the secondary barrier.
Sure. Yeah. The only thing that I found really useful coming out of the taser training was I was able to watch a couple of people volunteer to get hit by the tasers, and that was pretty funny. Other than that, it was worthless. So
exactly.
okay, so
I know.
how do you how do you go from, okay, something needs to be done to action? How did you get into action, and what were those first steps that got you an audience that you wanted to get this message to?
Well, I knew that if there was going to be any change that United was going to do, it had to be mandated by Congress. United doesn't, they feel they're not United, any airline. They feel they're an overregulated industry. I get it. There are a lot of regulations, but the regulations, the mandates that we have are all written in blood. They only happen because Congress mandated it after multiple accidents and multiple deaths. And we're talking about things like oxygen, fire suppression, terrain avoidance, traffic avoidance, the fortified cockpit door, crew rest. All these things were mandated by Congress, but only after multiple bloodshed and multiple deaths. And so I realized that I needed to go that route. And I went to my congressman and both of my senators and said, will you help out? Here's what's happening. And we dropped legislation that first year in 2013. And every 2 years, you have to reintroduce legislative language. And we've done that to this day. We did have some progress, which was great. We had the FAA reauthorization came up a little over 3 years ago, and we were able to get newly manufactured aircraft for delivery to be put into the FAA reauthorization. The problem with that is that we have the FAA who is stalling like they always do, and they still have not issued a final ruling. They haven't even issued the proposed ruling on it. And this was supposed to be a direct rulemaking that was mandated by Congress, that they were supposed to, within a year, enact all of the newly manufactured aircraft to have a secondary barrier. It's over 3 years later, and the FAA has, like I said, not issued a final rule. And now we have around 2,000 airplanes that have been ordered, and almost half of them have already been delivered. And now, because they haven't put out the rule, they are on site without a secondary barrier. So,
and you've got bipartisan consensus on this in Congress.
Absolutely. Every year we have come out with bipartisan. We started the bill with bipartisan. Listen, everyone wants the safety and security of Americans flying on our aircraft. No one wants a terrorist or a disturbed individual to be able to have access and use the aircraft as a weapon of mass destruction. And that's exactly what this is. There's a lot of fuel on these airplanes. We all know that. And that's exactly what they were able to do. And look at the consequences of what they were able to do. So
are you getting help from the flight attendants unions, pilots unions, not just ALPA, but APA, SWAPA? Have they been in your corner? And then what about the airlines themselves, not just United? Are you fighting against some of these forces at the steps of Congress, or does there seem to be some consensus across the industry in your favor?
Well, if we had consensus across the industry and there were no problems, even though it's a bipartisan effort, we would have already had secondary barriers on every single aircraft, or at least legislation and then the FAA ruling. And we don't yet. So there is hesitation, and none of it is for a good reason. The airlines, like I said, they don't want another regulation. They see it as a big cost. Well, listen, the first barriers that were put on, they're the ones that determine the marker. They're the ones that do work. And United was paying $5,000 for those barriers. They pay $1 million for an in-flight entertainment system on the same aircraft. So where's the analogy of one's a safety issue, one's for enjoyment, that we're not jumping on it and saying, let's do that? But we all know, let's say the secondary barrier weighs 30 pounds. United only thinks of the longevity of the aircraft and how much money it's going to cost them over time to have a 30-pound object on it. And because the airlines won't move on anything, we know that because of all the other things that were mandated, they were mandated by Congress. So now it's Congress's job to tell the FAA, to tell the airlines. And we have a lot of people, it is a bipartisan issue. There is nobody who goes against it, against protecting Americans and protecting the vulnerability on a flight deck, but getting there is a very different situation.
Sure.
I've talked to a lot of congressmen, senators, and I say, what more can I possibly do than what I'm doing? And they say, Ellen, are you kidding? Keep doing what you're doing. You just got legislation passed. Before you came down here, we didn't know of the vulnerability. We didn't know about a secondary barrier. Now everyone knows about it. So keep doing what you're doing. Well, this is a long time later, and we have a lot of stalling. And most of that stalling or non-activity on an issue that needs to be taken care of is from the FAA. It's, Congress gives a mandate and the FAA feels no obligation to meet the timelines that Congress deems are necessary and has mandated. So, like I said, in 2008 to 2011, the FAA did the study. They determined the vulnerability did exist and they determined what would and would not work, but they never let it out anywhere. In fact, they almost buried the study. No one knew about it. The airlines didn't know about it. Federal air marshals that I've talked to didn't even know about it. And they're deploying people to protect the cockpit and don't know the information on the study. It takes them till 2015 before they put out an advisory circular. That was 120-110. The problem is they put out an advisory circular when they could have put out an advisory directive. A directive would have meant that they would have had to do something. The circular just says, oh, gee whiz, you know what? We thought we should tell you guys. Let me just remind you. But the problem is what they were reminding the airlines of, in their words, during door transition, the flight deck is vulnerable. Well, what are you talking about putting out a circular? You're again, and finally, it takes till 2015. Think about that. How many years later? You're telling the airlines that every time that door opens up, the flight deck is vulnerable, and they're still not telling them that they have to do something.
Sure.
So they identify the study as a means of compliance. They tell the airlines you have to be able to hold off a 200-pound intruder for 5 seconds. Yes, because that's what we know works. They're not telling the airlines how they have to do that. They say, look at the study and see, what would comply with your method that you're going to use to be able to do that. And then we're going to have an inspector evaluate if you're able to do that. Well, first of all, not one airline, and I know this for a fact, not one airline requested the study. So none of them knew what the results were. And then all of the airlines just chose not to do anything, and no one is being tested. And the reason why we all know no one's being tested is because exactly what you said with the taser training, how you were laughing like, oh my gosh, you just got tasered. Like, it's the reason why we know that there is no one being tested to see if they can hold off a 200-pound intruder is because no one's out on sick leave because they got hurt. Because you know that if a 200-pound intruder came along and they were tested, all the flight attendants were tested, they'd be hurt. They can't hold off a 200-pound intruder. The 200-pound air marshal wasn't able to hold off the 200-pound intruder in many instances. So they send out the circular and none of the airlines comply with it. And the FAA is doing nothing to make sure that they comply with it.
Sure.
So, for us, as a whole, there isn't anyone who doesn't see the need for a secondary barrier. Why did we fortify the cockpit? Why do we spend a ton of money on federal air marshals? Why do we have the federal flight deck officers that are armed in the cockpit? Why does the TSA say you have to have a procedure before you open up the cockpit door? Why do they say if the aircraft has a secondary barrier that you have to use it? Why did the FAA come up with a study that involved all the stakeholders? And why did all the stakeholders go in there? Why did they then send out an advisory circular that says during door transition, the flight deck is vulnerable?
Right.
You know,
Right.
why did Congress mandate a fortified door? So we all agree that we need a secondary barrier, that there is a vulnerability, and yet we don't have consensus for anybody to actually make sure that it's
Sure.
done.
So the airlines are running cost benefit analysis, like you kind of alluded to before. It doesn't seem to make, the math doesn't make sense to them. The FAA, quite frankly, like every other giant bureaucracy, is what? They're a bunch of unelected bureaucrats. So you're not being represented. You know, you kind of see where the airline's coming from. I guess it would be different if the FAA or the Department of the DOT came down and said, you've got to have either secondary barriers or an air marshal on every flight. They may change their tone from that point. So
they will when the cost is
Right.
better for them, but only when they're forced to have
Right.
the cost better for them. So
Sure.
there were cost analysis done too. And I know even United Airlines said to me, listen, Ellen, if this was safety versus cost, we would go with the safety. It's just that that's not the intel that we're getting. Where the cockpit is safe. I say, well, where are you getting that intel from? Because the cockpit isn't safe, because it's been proven that it's not safe.
Sure.
But also Dr. Stuart Mueller did do a cost benefit risk assessment. And they said secondary barriers were by far the best method and the best cost. The Federal Air Marshal Program spends billions of dollars every year and is on a handful of airplanes.
Right.
The Federal Air Marshals is a complicated system too. What we need to do is think about how much money we're spending on federal air marshals, use the federal air marshals in other realms that they're needed for, so we could reduce their budget and then be able to afford secondary barriers to be put on. And as soon as the secondary barriers are paid for, I mean, it's a one-time cost thing. The maintenance on that is very simple. And even if you're talking about the same barrier that we were using, because we have a lot of existing aircraft that would need the retrofit, they can use that same barrier. And it was just installed when the airplane was on its regular
Right.
maintenance. So it wasn't downtime for the aircraft.
Sure. Sure. Well, we will certainly continue to follow and, keep getting the word out when we need to call our elected representatives to see what's going to happen next. So, well, ladies, I've taken up enough of your time. I can't thank you enough for joining me today. It's been a pleasure meeting both of you. So interesting to hear about where you started, why you started, and where you are today. I really, from the pilot group, want to congratulate you. Thank you for the work that you're both doing. It's important to all of us. And we wish your continued success for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting
All right.
you.
You too. Have a wonderful day.